we've talked before about the law of polarity, and we've mentioned how everything got its opposite,
Mhm.
which is kind of also connected to a law of contradiction, I guess. How we can always contradict everything, and how we can always go or look at anything from two different perspectives and two different ways. Nevertheless, as human beings, we have the tendency to usually aim for a certain aspect and try to go after it, such as, I want to be perfect all the time. I want to be the best all the time. I want to be
Mhm.
confident all the time. I want to be this all the time. I want to be happy, and we tend to forget or put the other side of the equation, if that's what we want to call it. We tend to forget that exists. We tend to forget that without sadness, there won't be
Mhm.
happiness, because sadness is what makes happiness technically.
We tunnel vision on one side of the
And
spectrum.
exactly, we kind of forget that, okay, it's a double side
Mhm.
or a double-edged sword or whatever you want to call it. The example is quite bad, to be honest, but we forget that we have to go, that we're like a clock, that we go back to that example of the clock that is always going in
Swinging.
or swinging in both directions, and we're always going to end up in situations or times or periods where we're happy or maybe confident,
Mhm.
and we're going to be in time situations or whatever we want to call it again, maybe insecure or miserable or
Mhm.
sad or doubtful about ourselves.
I think the issue is that we see someone who's contradicting themselves,
Hmm.
that they're a hypocrite, that something is inconsistent about their character,
Hmm.
that they're hiding something, or that they don't know themselves, they're not
Hmm.
sure about their own opinions and everything. And I mean, in the beginning, why I wanted to talk about this topic is because many people don't see that contradiction is normal in our character, in our psyche. Like it's actually the normal thing to say how you feel about something, but maybe after a few hours or after a few days, when your mindset
Hmm.
is different, you're gonna say maybe the opposite.
Hmm.
And even people who are in essence really emotional people can also be logical sometimes. It's there is no one line, there is no,
Hmm.
as you said, as you tie it to the law of polarity and the philosophy of Taoism, that
Hmm.
there are two sides of the spectrum and life is consists of these two sides, and it's the same about everything about us,
Hmm.
that there are two different sides and they need to coexist together. And it's normal to see people behave in a completely different way that
Hmm.
might surprise you sometimes. But yeah, I think it's just a huge problem in society in general too, when you see someone not behaving like your expectations and thinking that it's not who they are and that they're faking something, while in reality it's just we think we tend to think in black and white in so many things, especially about people, that they are either this or this and they can't be in between.
Okay, now we're taking it from another perspective,
Hmm.
but I guess that's also tied to, because we always make images of other people in our
Hmm.
heads. We always make the image, okay, like this person always reacts or always says this and this or behaves this and
And
this.
we want this image to be consistent.
It's not that we want it to be consistent,
Hmm.
it's that when it's not the same, we start wondering if
Hmm.
there's like, what's the reason behind it.
Yeah.
Then it's like you're getting hit by a truck, because
Yeah.
suddenly the image that you have of this person, which probably a part of your life revolves around it,
Hmm.
is not the same anymore.
Yeah.
And then if you're gonna have to question this person's image and why it's changing, then maybe your image of everything around you, this is going to the extreme,
Yeah.
but maybe then the image of everything around you is also not correct.
Hmm.
So that's why we kind of don't like people to act in ways that we don't expect them to.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to look at it more, um, not just the people around us, but in ourselves as well.
Yeah.
You know, I have these tendencies as well, where sometimes I think or I feel like, I'm not allowed to make mistakes.
Hmm.
I want to be perfect. I want to be just perfect all
Yeah,
the
I can
time. I'm
relate.
not allowed to make mistakes
Hmm.
and this and this. And I guess a lot of people think the same way as well. But for me, the thing is that we tend to forget that this is not possible.
Yeah.
We're human beings.
That's
We're
the thing.
driven by a lot of different things. So, how can we, as the human race, maybe get to become more? acceptant and have it always in the back of our minds that things are not only one-sided or are not only linear,
Mhm.
but we're always going to go in the opposite direction of what we want, and then we're going to find our way back to where we are right now.
I think it has to go to the idea of open-mindedness, because it's not only about being open-minded with other
Mm-hmm.
people and who they are. It's also about being open-minded about yourself, because we also have images about ourselves, not just other
Mm-hmm.
people, and we build our
Definitely, yeah.
identity. So when we are acting in a way that contradicts our identity, then we're
Mm-hmm.
also surprised and shocked, and like we don't want to accept that. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes us a long time to integrate maybe this new part we discovered
Mm-hmm.
about ourselves in this identity that we have. So I think it's really about open-mindedness and willingness to discover yourself, and realizing that you might discover a lot of things that contradict so many things you believed in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Things maybe you don't like. This goes to the idea of projection. Things
Mm-hmm.
that we don't like in other people and annoy us sometimes reflect who we are, sides of who
Yeah,
we are that
yeah,
we don't
yeah.
know. And they're usually sides that contradict the things, because we don't like it in other people.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't like it, but we still act in it. We just don't see it. So that's also kind of contradicting.
Sometimes we're also blind to our own mistakes.
Exactly.
So
So it really has to go with open-mindedness. It's something really important to just be willing that you will discover new things. You might not like some of them, but you need to accept them. And
mhm.
that's open-mindedness, kind of.
I think for me, it also is connected to, which is also open mindedness, but just from a different perspective,
Mm.
accepting the fact that we all have multiple sides of ourselves. Because most people tend to differentiate between the different sides.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
this, I'm not that, I'm this, I'm not. No, this is not me. This is just a mask. This
Mhm.
is who I am, but also this is who I am. And then
Yeah.
they're always differentiating between them. So whenever something happened, they kind of become self-conscious about it, and they start looking at themselves from a third-person
Yeah.
perspective. And
Like,
I
this is
feel
not
that
me. And
leads to a lot of contradiction in the
mhm.
first place, because at the end of the day, these are all parts of who you are,
Mhm.
and some of the parts of that describe who you are going to contradict each other.
Yes.
That is by nature. That's like the one of the laws of the nature. Um, a philosopher, a philosopher said that, I don't remember the name, but he said something between the lines of, the moment you define yourself as such, everything that you're not is gonna get attracted to you
Yeah.
automatically.
We've talked about this also before, I
I'm not.
think.
The quote is definitely said in a different way, and like I said, I don't remember who said it, but it makes sense because it's the yin and yang. Without the white fish, the black fish wouldn't exist,
Yeah.
and without the black fish, the white fish wouldn't
Mhm.
exist. So when we define ourselves as something, which we always do anyways, of course, there's going to be part of us that are contradicting this part,
Yeah.
and I feel like when you get to accept the fact that, okay, I've got the logical side, I've got the emotional side of myself, I've got this side of myself, I've got the more angry, I've got the more
Mhm.
happy, I've got the goofy, I've got the controlling side of myself, and so on and so on and so on. I feel like that's when you kind of start dissolving a certain self-image of yourself,
Mhm.
because you start realizing, like, okay, everything that I define myself as such, I'm gonna also attract the opposite of
Yeah.
that. So the second that I define myself as this, I'm also gonna be the opposite of this at some point. The
I get it. I get it. And I want to take it from another perspective that I've been
Yeah.
thinking about. It's that when you accept contradiction, like you
Mm-hmm.
understand that whatever you're thinking about, the opposite of it is also something worth thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I see it in the sense when it comes to friendships and relationships. If you are in a relationship with someone, or you have friends who are exactly like you,
Mm-hmm.
then there's not a lot of room for learning, because
Mm-hmm.
less contradictions are happening about the things that you're talking about and the
Mm-hmm.
interests, and that you're always being agreeable with each other. While
Mm-hmm.
if you have friends who are maybe opposite of you, that's where a lot of room for learning is going to happen, because you will always argue about things. You always have
You're always
different
getting
opinions,
challenged.
and exactly, you're always getting challenged. You're
Mm-hmm.
always seeing the opposite view of what you have, the same view that you might be thinking
Mm-hmm.
about sometimes, but you just deny it, or maybe you're not
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. because it's not your norm, it's not your
Mhm.
what you usually think about.
Yeah.
And so when you see it in other people, they kind of you start having clash with them. You know,
Mhm.
maybe your egos are clashing, but that's actually where room for improvement and improving yourself and understanding other self and yourself begin, or not begin. Okay, I need to rephrase it. And that's where there will be more room for understanding yourselves and
Mhm.
understanding other people as well. And it's also related to open-mindedness, because you're willing to talk to people who are very different than you.
Exactly. That the open mindedness, you wouldn't be even willing to have such challenge or
Mhm.
somebody challenge you to such lengths.
Mhm.
But again, I'm just going to build up a little bit here on top of it. You said when somebody challenges us in certain ways, of course, we can end up discovering new parts of ourselves,
Yes, exactly.
and you might find that there's parts you've got a side of you that you've never thought existed
Mhm.
because you've never been challenged in such a way.
Exactly.
You know what
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean?
That's it. That's it. It's the same. Even doesn't have to be people that you know around you. It's even
Mm-hmm.
if you see online communities that people are always swarming to communities that are agreeing with their
Mm-hmm.
opinion and views on life, and they don't like to see anything related to what they don't like or
Mm-hmm.
what they think is bad or whatever. And it's mostly related to confirmation bias, where
Mm-hmm.
you're just seeking information that are, agreeing with everything that
Because
you do.
it also hurts our egos, like if you believe in something and somebody comes along the ways and tells you that way your beliefs are wrong.
Mhm. It's a big strike to your ego. It's a big.
It's not just the ego as well, but it's also like kind of, again, if you're going to go to the extreme scenarios
Mhm.
here, if your belief or your image of something is not right, then how do you know that everything else is correct?
Yeah,
How do you know that your image of the world is correct?
exactly.
So it's also a survival mechanism, because
Mhm.
if people tell us that what you believe in is wrong and you're standing for it and fighting for it is wrong, then
And who am I? It's
then
like,
you're gonna start questioning
yeah,
not just the belief of this certain topic, but also everything that's connected to it. And of course, since it's a hard something that you really believe in,
hmm
a lot of your life is gonna be built around it.
hmm
So when we have these clash with people or these kind of arguments or these kind of challenges, it's not just about the belief or the ego, but it's also again like the survival mechanism, because then the brain
makes
won't
sense.
know if it's functioning in the way that it's supposed to be
Yeah.
functioning, and that can be quite daunting for a lot of people.
What I also think is just really important to actually understand contradiction and
Mm-hmm.
accepting it is realizing two things. First thing is that you're often wrong, and the second thing is that you don't really know much about
Mm-hmm.
yourself and about other people and the
Mm-hmm.
world. If you have that in mind, and automatically you will be more open-minded to learn more, to see when you are wrong. And these are two things that are not always easy to do, because you need to let your ego down. You need
Mm-hmm.
to think more rationally sometimes. That just
I don't know
being
about
humble also, honestly.
the first one
Hmm About being wrong.
about being often wrong, but I'm certain that the second one is definitely one of
Mm-hmm.
something really important, because once you realize that you don't know much, then that's when you're gonna start questioning things and be more open minded.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you always think you're wrong
Not always.
or often think that you're
Mm.
wrong, then even when you learn something new, how are you gonna know whether that's right or wrong?
I think what I mean more is
It's
that
just
you.
that we the label of it is like a little
Mm-hmm.
bit black and white.
Mm-hmm.
That's my problem with it. I guess in the essence, I know what you mean. I'm not that certain though.
It's kind of about that. Sometimes we
Hmm.
say that we know something for sure, but then
Hmm.
only after a while we realize that we were wrong. Even though in that moment, I mean,
Hmm.
it happens to me at least, that you get shocked in the moment that you were so wrong about
Hmm.
something that you were so sure about at a certain point in your life, that I was like, okay, maybe I am wrong about more
Hmm.
things. Not everything. There are things
Okay,
I'm right
then
about,
if
but
if that's the angle that you're
Mhm.
taking, then yeah, sure. This
yeah.
is this is.
And if you don't realize, if you think you're right about
Mhm.
anything, then why would you learn about different opinions and perspective? If you are
I'm
right,
not
and
saying that you should think that you're
Mhm.
right, but I'm more saying that just know that you don't know much.
Yeah,
And there's
exactly.
always two sides of the coin, and there's always another side of the story. And of course, if like we've said this before, you know, you've got your side of the story, you've got the other person's side of the story, and then you've got the neutral side of the story,
Hmm.
and you got like unlimited amount of side of the same story.
Yeah.
It's not that you're often wrong because you can't really determine whether you're wrong or right, and you can determine other stuff as well by just keeping an open mind and realizing that you don't know much.
Yeah.
And even the stuff that you know are just based on everything that we have built so far in
It's
our
probably a
society.
lot of things that we've learned from other people or read
Mm,
somewhere or saw somewhere. So how do you know that that person wasn't wrong or that this
mhm,
article is right? It's all things that you're not sure about. So where do you base this information from? Like, we're still human beings who make errors. So take anything that you read or listen to with a hint of salt.
mhm,
Like, it's good to question things. Maybe over questioning everything is kind of a waste of time sometimes, but for the most part, it's good to question yourself and question the people around you. And because you want to improve, you want to,
mhm.
if you want to reach a
Yet we still
clear,
don't do it that
yeah,
much. I think just because we usually tend to just like read something and believe it,
yeah,
or even if we deny it or we try to be in denial of it, we kind of get into confirmation bias of trying
yeah,
to find things to prove
exactly.
that, okay, what I've read is right or what I thought was correct.
Hmm. It happens way too
I
often.
don't know what it's was related to be honest. I've thought about this for a lot. Like I thought this for quite some time. And I could never figure out why we always get stuck in believing what we read and
It has to
we
do
try to
maybe,
confirm it in other ways.
I mean, it happens to me sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because I buy a book that, and I put myself in the mind, in the state of mind that
Mm-hmm.
it has to be something I'm agreeing with or I'm liking because
Mm-hmm.
I bought the book. It's mine and it's something I want to enjoy. Even self help books, even books about just information. And then when I read something that I don't agree with, it's kind of I like to deny it sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I should believe this. Maybe, but then I realize it when I'm halfway through the book that maybe this isn't for me. This is not what I want to read.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clicking with me. And in the past, I would just finish the book anyway and think that I believe everything about it. But this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm newly developing, that it's okay not to finish a book and it's okay not to agree with things because the people who wrote the book wrote it from their perspective, which could be the truth for them, but it's not necessarily the truth for you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just a completely different human being and they have their own lives. So
I guess maybe just remembering that we're all human beings at the end of the day,
we're
and that
all like,
no one is perfect,
mhm.
and we all have our ups and downs. We all have our good and bad traits. I guess just remembering that makes you also puts you in a position where you know that the information or the source of the information could also be wrong
Yeah.
because they're just another human being.
We also have our different circumstances and,
Experience,
and
circumstances,
perception of
yeah,
the world. We
definitely,
all view the
definitely.
world in different way because sometimes we think people see things, even
The
see
same way we
colors,
do it.
the same way we do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really hard to break
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, to realize that someone else views the world completely different than you.
Mm-hmm.
So even a single piece of information can actually be true for some people but not true for other people. And this
Mm-hmm.
is also something that I've realized recently, that because I used to think that if something is true, if something is
Mm-hmm.
a fact, then it's a fact for everyone. It's just an objective thing. But this is also not always true. This is also based on our experience and our perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way why a couple of days ago we were talking about self-help and why you could give an advice for someone who is starting with self-help that it could not work for them. But if you tell the same advice for someone who is already advanced in their
Mm-hmm.
lives, it could click with them and just help them improve. It just, we're all built different. We all have our different circumstances.
That's exactly why we also talked about, for example, like why certain people need more advanced advice at the beginning than
Yeah,
others, just because that's how it's the stage that they're in and it's the way that they define themselves in their
hmm,
life. So, you
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
أنا ما أخي بلش أفصل
yeah.
الحديد
But
شوية.
yeah, so I think that's it. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, this is what I have to say about this episode. It's just something that I'm always thinking about, how
Mhm.
we contradict ourselves. And even though I realize this, when I see someone contradicting themselves, I
Mhm.
start to think the black and white way about them. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, if they're doing this bad thing, they're usually not doing bad things. So maybe they are bad people, but they are hiding it. But no,
Mhm.
they are good people who did something bad. Maybe it doesn't have to change who they are as people. They're just showing a new side that maybe they didn't show before, but it doesn't
Maybe
cancel the other parts.
sometimes it's also not just a side. Sometimes just like the circumstances, because like if you've got someone who is usually really tentative to other people, you know, and they suddenly stop being that,
Yeah.
then a lot of people get shocked of like, oh wow, why are you not being the same kind of tentative to me usually? But maybe this
Yeah.
person, it's not like he's showing a different side of himself, just that he is or she is extremely busy in their lives. They've got a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff on their mind, a
Circumstances.
lot of worries. So for a certain amount of time, they have to put these tendencies that are part of them on the side and then
Yeah.
focus on something else.
Yeah.
Or
That's
maybe they're
normal.
going through a grieving phase. They lost somebody and they have to, like, their energy and their time are going to that other direction.
And I think that's why we shouldn't expect consistency from people when it comes to stuff, because nobody's 100% consistent with
You
their
can't
actions
be
and with their
exactly,
character. So
exactly. We're all flawed and we're all gonna make
yeah,
mistakes.
I think it's also kind of related to trying not to judge people for what they do in the moment, because maybe it's not the norm for them, but their circumstances, the thing they've been through that day could play a role on that.
Definitely,
So
definitely.
we're really complex beings, and sometimes we just forget that we have our each person has his own shadow side that it shows up sometimes in one way or another. But yeah, that's all what I have to say in this episode. What about you?
I've got nothing else to add, to be honest. The
All right.
topic is a bit too
It's a bit more
bit compact, I would say.
yeah, but I feel like it was. I like that we talk about this. I think it's also important because we've been talking about it a lot in private, and we've never mentioned it in the podcast somehow. Especially because it's like really related to Taoism and the law of polarity, which we
Definitely.
always talk about.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.